adults do that, would you? Especially getting up on those risers. I love to see them get up there. Now, after our guys get the risers down and that sort of stuff, if you have kids that you want to take back to the nursery, well, once they get out of the way, then you all can do that. If you want to take your kids back to the nursery. Cool. All right, then we'll go down the nursery. We're so honored to have Christian with us, who's going to come and preach to us now. Christian, where'd you go? Oh, there you are. Thought he ran out of us. The other day we were coming home from town, and we were backed up by traffic, and there was like a tractor, and then there was a car, and then there was a big tractor pulling like a corn planter, and then a car. And then we were behind that car. And we were coming down this stretch there by Softly's, by Zach Softly's, and it's kind of curvy and hilly in there, and finally going around a curve. And I looked up at the front tractor, and I told Marlene, I said, that looks like Christian on that tractor. And sure enough, it was. It was Christian. It was Drive Your Tractor to School Day. And they had driven the tractor to school. It's so good to know that we got a kid who can drive a tractor and preach at the same time. We're going to let Christian come and preach to us. Come on, buddy.
All right, can you hear me? All right, sweet. Okay, so, all right, this is going to work. Howdy. If you don't know me, I'm Christian Thompson, and today I'm going to preach to you. And for those of you who don't know me, I really like sports. Like, I really enjoy watching sports. I really like playing sports, even though I'm not very good at it. I still like to play. And like I said, I love to watch sports. I have a favorite team in almost every league in the United States. And so I'm going to show you some of the stadiums of some of my favorite teams. This is Nissan Stadium in Nashville, home of the Tennessee Titans. I've been here 3 times for the Music City Bowl when UK went there a few years back. Next one, please. AT&T Center, home of the San Antonio Spurs. They're currently in the playoffs right now for the NBA. They're doing pretty well. I feel pretty good about our chances. Next one, please. This is Guaranteed Rate Field, home of the Chicago White Sox. Currently the best team in the AL Central. So, you know, I'm feeling pretty good about my chances with them. Next one, please. CenturyLink Field. This is, I've actually been to a professional game here. I went to the Seattle Sounders game with my mom and my grandmother and my uncle when we were up in Seattle. It's a really cool experience. If you ever get a chance to, you should try it. Next one, please. This is White Hart Lane, home of the Tottenham Hotspurs, my favorite team in England, soccer team in England. I promise there's a point to all of this. This is actually, here in a few weeks, it's going to be torn down. They're having their last game there here in a few weeks, and they're actually playing right now. I'm not going to check them on the score right now, though. Next one. All right, this is the last one. This is one of my favorite stadiums in the world. This is Westfalenstadion in Germany, in Dortmund, Germany, home of Borussia Dortmund. And it's really cool. It's a huge stadium. And this side closest to us, behind the goal, that's standing room only. No seats, standing the entire soccer game. They are crazy. It's called the Yellow Wall. And so I'd like to go visit a lot of these stadiums at some point in my life and go watch a professional game. My brother, however, has been to a bunch of professional games throughout his life. And I'll tell you who took him. It was my dad. My dad took me. And my dad's taken me to 0 NFL games. And when we bring this topic up, we like to joke about it a lot. My brother says that he's the favorite, obviously. When Dad brings it up, he says that I've been to more UK football games, so it counteracts, and I say, no, it doesn't really. But I mean, Kyle has been to Paul Brown Stadium, watched the Cincinnati, Cleveland games. He's been to Cleveland to watch them play, and all of this while Tim Couch was playing for the Browns. So I'm a little jealous. And I mean, it's a little unfair, right? just a little unfair. And that's one of the many unfair things that has happened to me in my life. And I'd like to give you another story. For those of you who don't know, I applied for the Governor's Scholar Program, which we have several people that have done it. Parker went last year. It's a really cool program. You get money to go to in-state schools, and it's a great opportunity to spend 5 weeks at a college campus and do college-like things and prepare for that. And so I filled out the application. I'd gotten really ready for it. I felt really good about my chances. I felt like I was one of the best students at my school, and once we got past the district, I felt pretty good about my chances. So then on Good Friday was when I started hearing that everybody was getting their letters of their acceptance. Caroline had gotten hers, so I was like, if Caroline can get in, surely I can get in. So I felt really good about it, and then Zoe Parker and Catherine Medford told me that they needed a ride after school. So being a nice guy, I decided to give them a ride after school, but I was kind of going really fast because I really wanted to know if I'd gotten in. So I dropped them off and I sped off, and I got home. I picked up the mail. That entire week I was picking up the mail just so I could find out if I'd gotten my letter or not. And so I held the letter in my hand, and I just looked at it. I started getting really nervous because I was like, well, what if I don't get in? This is going to be really bad for me that I just hyped myself up for nothing. And then, so I sat on the porch with Mom, and I opened it up. I held it open. I opened the first flap, and all you can see is, "Dear Mr. Christian Thompson." I was like, all right, this is a good start. I fold open the next part and it says, "Thank you for your interest in the Governor's Scholar Program. We regret to inform you that you have not been accepted." And I was heartbroken. This was something I'd been wanting for a long time. Ever since I entered into middle school, this was something that I had planned on my radar for this summer. And when I found out that I didn't have it, it broke me down. I really was torn up about this. I have the spot on the back of our farm that I just sit and throw rocks, and that's what I did. And I'll admit, I cried. I did not feel good about myself. I felt awful. Because, I'll brag about myself real quick, but there's a point behind it. I'm the vice president of my class for 3 years now. I had a 28 on the ACT at the time, 31 now. I'm the drum major at my school, and I'm the Secretary of State for my Kentucky Youth Assembly. But they don't consider me a Governor's Scholar. And to me, this was unfair. And through this entire time, because it was Good Friday, I was especially thinking about God, and made me think about the unfairness of God. So today, I'd like to talk to you about how God is unfair, and that is perfect. My first example that God is unfair is Israel. In Genesis, God comes to Abram and says, "I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing." Through Abraham, the 12 tribes of Israel were born and were promised salvation alone because they were God's chosen people and were promised the Holy Land. However, God gave them into slavery to the Egyptians. Well, how is this fair? How can God promise them that they're His chosen people and then decide, you know what, the Egyptians can have them, it's fine? But then God gave them Moses several years later, and Moses would help lead them into freedom, into the Promised Land, after 80 years of wandering the desert. But God does not let Moses into the Holy Land, but instead, Israel must choose a new leader. But how's this fair? Moses, who was God's chosen man for all of Israel and led them for 80 years throughout the desert, is told that he can't enter it. He can only see it. Under Joshua, the new leader of Israel, Israel would take control of the Holy Land and prosper until his death, where they're defeated again. Well, how could God allow for His chosen people to be defeated again? How is that fair? And then some years go by, and Israel would become blessed by God again, and they would be under the reigns of Saul and David and Solomon, until Solomon dies and Israel is divided and eventually sent into captivity. Well, how could God continue to do this to His chosen people? He keeps letting them close to Him and pushing them away, and getting them close to Him, and He just let them be divided and thrown into captivity again. Well then, during the captivity, Daniel comes around and restores the faith of the Israelites and they rebuilt the temple in the days of Esther and Ezra and Nehemiah commenced. However, by the time Malachi rolls around, the Jews are idolatrous again, and God does not speak through a prophet for 400 years. How is it fair? How could God abandon his people yet again, and for 400 years of no prophet, no one speaking to them? Well, by the time the gospel rolls around, the Jews are anxious for their promised Messiah. They are under Roman rule, and they're trying their best to commit to the law as they can. However, the Messiah is not what they wanted. They were promised a king of nations, and here's a carpenter from Nazareth. He's not a king, and he preaches love and fellowship to God. And salvation can only be found through him and is available to all people. All people. This surely cannot be the Messiah that we were promised. We are the chosen people, the Israelites would say. We are the only ones God should save. Not the Egyptians, not the Assyrians, not the Sumerians, not all those people who took us over and said, "You're ours now." This man is blasphemous, and God is unfair. Well, let's look at Job for more proof. If you'll turn with me to Job, we'll read the first bit of the first chapter. I'll give you all a second. All right, there's the second. And in the land of Uz, there lived a man whose name was Job. This man was blameless and upright. He feared God and shunned evil. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters. He owned 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, and 500 donkeys, and had a large number of servants. He was the greatest man among all the people of the East. His sons used to hold feasts in their homes on their birthdays, and they would invite their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. When a period of feasting had run its course, Job would make arrangements for them to be purified. Early in the morning, he would sacrifice a burnt offering for each of them, thinking, "Perhaps my children have sinned and cursed God in their hearts." This was Job's regular custom. One day, the angels came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them. The Lord said to Satan, "Where have you come from?" Satan answered the Lord, "From roaming throughout the earth, going back and forth on it." Then the Lord said to Satan, pay attention to this part. Then the Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job?" So let's stop real quick. Without all that Satan has said to God is, "Oh, I've just been walking around earth." And God just says, "Well, here's this guy, Job. Have you tried to tempt him yet?" Satan says nothing about Job. Satan says nothing about Job. And God just openly offers him to Satan. So we'll continue reading. Have you considered my servant Job? There is no man on earth like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil. Does Job fear God for nothing? Satan replied. Have you not put a hedge around him and his household and everything he has? You have blessed the work of his hands, so that his flocks and herds are spread throughout the land. But now stretch out your hand and strike everything he has, and he will surely curse you to your face. The Lord said to Satan, "Very well then, everything he has is in your power. But on the man himself do not lay a finger." Then Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. Job proceeds to lose everything he had owned. Satan takes everything and God allows it. And that's just unfair. How could God allow such a godly man, a righteous man, to have all his possessions taken away from him for a test? How dared God decide that he should be tested? And now here's the point. God is unfair in the eyes of man. You see, God's plans for our lives are fair in his sight, so they are perfect. Who are we to decide what is perfect in the eyes of the Creator? It's not God that is unfair to man, but man that is unfair to God. God gave us Eden, and we ate the fruit. The Israelites continually disobeyed God, and because of this, pushed themselves away from God, and he allowed it and allowed their consequences. God hands the Israelites over because of disobedience. Moses does not reach the promised land because he hit the rock and disobeyed God. Israelites would leave God and follow idols, and God would allow them to be sent into captivity. We want to look at the Israelites and say, oh, you silly Israelites, God obviously wants you to follow his rules. What are you doing, guys? We're doing it all perfectly. But that's hypocritical, because we're not. Because we do this. God gives us the law in our hearts, and we disobey it and turn away for something else. Be it money, be it school, be it sports. You see, humans are really dumb if you really think about it. So let's have a heart-to-heart real quick and talk about this. I sat here and talked about myself for a good 10 minutes and my problems and complained about not getting into a 5-week camp that really won't do anything for me except give me a good experience because I don't plan on staying in state. I complained about my father not taking me to a stadium where I could watch a bunch of grown men chase and hit each other for an egg-shaped ball. You see, there's a form of philosophy known as humanism, where the entire focus is on ourselves, the human, and what we can do to improve ourselves. Humanism commonly is associated with atheism because you are your own God and control your own destiny, and you don't need someone else doing it for you. Now, let's look at millennials and college campuses even. God is commonly scoffed at, and these can be large places of persecution for Christians. But wisdom in man gets you nowhere. Ask Solomon. God tells Solomon in 1 Kings that he will give him anything he asks for. And Solomon says, wisdom. He's a king, thinks wisdom will help him lead Israel better. And this begins the downfall of Solomon. It is commonly inferred that Ecclesiastes is written by Solomon. And if you will, turn to the beginning of Ecclesiastes with me, and we'll examine a little something of what Solomon has to say. If you look at the first few subtitles, he says, everything is meaningless. Wisdom is meaningless. Pleasures are meaningless. Wisdom and folly are meaningless. Toil is meaningless. I think Solomon's made it pretty clear that when he asked for wisdom, he didn't get exactly what he thought of. You see, wisdom had brought him nothing but pain and strife and had taken him away from God. In Ecclesiastes 1:16 and 17, Solomon says, I said to myself, look, I've increased in wisdom more than anyone who has ever ruled over Jerusalem before me. I've experienced much of wisdom and knowledge. Then I applied myself to the understanding of wisdom. Excuse me. And also madness and folly. But I learned that this too is a chasing after the wind. You realize that knowledge is like chasing after the wind. I don't know if you've ever tried it, but wind's always going to win. So humans are stupid and don't know what is best for themselves. Only God, who is omnipotent and holy, knows what is best for us. And sometimes that means we'll go through trials like Job did. But you know what? It builds perseverance. I recently did David Platt's Secret Church, which, excuse me, for those of you who don't know, the Secret Church is a Bible study for 6 hours from 6 to midnight, where it is intense, you focus on one thing. And the focus of prayer for this year's Secret Church was Iran and the believers inside. These brothers and sisters faced persecution that we could never imagine in America. Jail, being disconnected from their families, and even being killed. But their perseverance and faith in Christ reminded me of James 1:12. Blessed is the one who perseveres in a trial, because having stood the test, that person will receive the crown of life. The Lord has promised to the throne who love him. Thank you very much. Excuse me. So we must remember that God is in constant control from the highest of highs to the lowest of lows. Now there is one way I think God is unfair, and that would be in the death of his Son. Jesus Christ was blameless and perfect. God decided that because, as said in Romans 6:23, the wages of sin is death. In order to pay for our sins, someone had to die, and it had to be the holiest of holies, his Son, Jesus Christ. God decided that he would give up his only Son so that he could give a chance at salvation to the billions of people that have walked the earth. To the murderers, to the rapists, to the liars, to the cheaters, the sinners, to the humans. He has given us a chance at being with him in heaven because his son took a platform with Barabbas and Pilate and sang quiet while they let go a murderous rebel while he gets put to death. And if Jesus and Barabbas does not show the perfect unfairness of God, then I don't know what does. You see, God sent his son to the post and the cross, and I have been given a chance to walk away free like Barabbas. This is because God is unfair, and that is perfect. Thank you.
And aren't you glad that God is perfect? I mean, God knew what he was doing. He knew it from the beginning of time. What Christians do, I mean, from the beginning till now.